takes, both from a strategic level and from a tactical level, on how he's moving forward despite all everything that has happened over the last year and so forth with COVID and everything. So Stephen, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. All right, that was that. That was it. Thank you. Good night.
So, so
That's a lot.
maybe we can get started off by, I would love to just, I know I'm kind of reading off your bio a little bit, but I would love to just hear your story. It's never as good in, my mouth as it is coming out of the actual person's.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. Aloha mai kakou, everybody. Nice to see so many familiar board member faces here. And mahalo nui for the invite to be able to share a little bit of my story or mo'olelo. Like Michael was mentioning, I'm from Aleimanu, and I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area in my late teens. I won't divulge any actual years because I don't want to date myself, but I moved in my late teens, and when I first moved here, I was kind of like, didn't know what to do. It was like a culture shock, and I wasn't musical at the time in the sense of traditional Hawaiian music. I was a typical band geek. I played trumpet, but part of the reason why I learned to play all of these instruments is because I yearned for being back home in Hawaii, and I felt so lost over here. So I wanted a connection back home. And the easiest way to do that for me was basically to pick up an ukulele and sing the songs that I heard on the radio growing up. Was never really taught any of the instruments that I play currently. But I do come from a very musical family. My grandmother was a huge influence on me growing up. She played ukulele and sang. I had two very talented uncles. One of them is Nando Swan, who currently plays for and has played for the last 40 years with Otasan, who's a very popular ukulele player and teacher. And my other uncle, Larry Debbie Barr, also played for about 30, 40 years at Jermaine's Luau. If you've ever been to Jermaine's Luau over in the West Side, you probably saw my uncle smiling over there playing his guitar, pearly shells and all that kind of stuff. But so I came from that kind of family where every weekend there was something happening, not musical, solely musical, but it was a party event or a kanikapila at somebody's house. And those people were there. And it was just like another element that was at a party. It just happened to be music at a party. It wasn't like, that was the centerpiece of the party. So I kind of grew up in that environment, and all that stuff sort of soaked into my subconscious. So it was really easy for me to reconnect with that when I moved here to San Francisco. And it was really through my wife's doing to start playing professionally. And I was really kind of a shy person, so I really didn't think I had what it took to be a professional Hawaiian musician. So my wife really kind of pushed me to have the confidence to gather a collection of songs and fly back to Hawaii and start recording. And I'm really grateful that she helped to push me along.
So one question that I have is, how long did you play before you started teaching? And by the way, where did you go? You came here in high school.
Yeah, so I would have went to Radford if I stayed.
Okay.
So I thank whoever was responsible for making me come here, because if I went to Radford, I probably would have been in the UFC. Because it's a school that's known for its scrapping. So yeah, I'm really glad I took that fork in the road and went to San Francisco Bay Area. I learned, ukulele was always, like everybody here, I'm sure everybody here, most of us or all of us are from Hawaii, and all of us probably had a ukulele in the house. It was like one of those things, everybody had a phone, ukulele, TV, those cool plantation shutters and style shutters. But the ukulele was like one of those things that it was just always there. so readily available for any of us to pick up and strum along. So I was playing since I was a very young keiki as far as ukulele is concerned. Um, the when I moved here, I kind of fell into bass, guitar, and kiho alu or slack key. There was nobody really playing or teaching slack key here on the mainland, so I had to um, kind of just sit there, play what I heard on the albums, and then sort of emulate what I was hearing and try to figure out tuning. There wasn't any YouTube, so I couldn't go to somebody's YouTube channel and say, this is how, or even internet for that matter. So, nowadays I sound like an old person, like my grandpa or something, but now these kids have it easy today with the YouTube and the internet, but it is true because everything is sort of like readily available for, to learn anything out there. And I really am grateful for how I learned, and because I think it gives me a greater appreciation of the craft because I had to spend so much time learning it. And I didn't learn it overnight, like just by watching somebody's YouTube channel. So I learned a lot of my instruments fairly quickly just by studying and practicing over and over. My singing, falsetto singing, actually, it's a funny story. It actually came to me sort of by accident. I was in a group, and I was the bass player in the group. And the group's name was Kilo Hana. Daryl probably heard of Kilo Hana from back in the day. David Liu was also in that group, Ray Bombao. But our lead singer in that group left the group, and we didn't have a singer. And we sort of all kind of looked around the room and, asked ourselves, who is going to be our singer, and does anyone want to give it a shot? And I sort of raised my hand, very hesitantly. And in the beginning, I was just kind of emulating my favorite bands like Hui Ohana, Gabby Pahinui, Israel Kamakaviva Ole Makahasans. But then I started to, gain confidence, and just through practice, I was able to find my own voice kind of fairly quickly. But it was definitely a mistake that, not a mistake, but it was an accident that I learned falsetto.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I come from a family of musicians. Both of my parents are. I'm the Kolohe one that never learned anything, of course. But my dad brought up the same thing the other day, where it's like, you have it so lucky. He talks a lot about, because he plays bass and guitar, and then kind of, when he came to the islands long time ago, like 40 years almost now, and slack key is something like totally new for a lot of people. So it's interesting that you kind of saw it the other way, right? You came from somewhere that maybe had more, and then you came here and no one played it, and it presented an opportunity for you. And not only do you do all of this, but you're a man of many talents, right? You run a normal kind of day job, which is, I think, something that is I think Hawaii is probably more common, right? Where we all work 1, 2, 3 jobs even to kind of make ends meet, keep up with the high cost of living. So you do both, right? You have a day, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of run an IT and a technology department at a really big firm in downtown SF and do this on the side, no?
So it's interesting. It was kind of like, so I've been in IT for a while, and always been sort of technology focused. I've always been the guy that had to have the next, the coolest gadget, or I've always it's always fascinated me, technology. So when the pandemic hit, and everybody was sort of freaking out, musicians in particular, because all of the gigs dried up. I kind of freaked out myself in the beginning because I didn't know what I was going to do. But I think my experience in technology and IT sort of gave me a sense of calm, because I had already been working at the beginning of the pandemic. I had already been using Zoom for 5 years.
Yeah.
So I already knew the ins and outs of Zoom technology, video conferencing technology, and what it took to be able to uh, give a nice presentation, you know, and how important audio was, and lighting and video. And so that sort of segue came naturally for me, and it gave me a sense of confidence. Um, you know, a lot of people were figuring out, I wish I had, you know, hindsight 2020, no pun intended, but I wish I had known how successful Zoom was going to be at the beginning of 2020, or now I would have threw all my peanuts in that pot, and because they just like, were so successful last year. But just knowing the ins and outs of that technology kind of helped me, and kind of gave me a little bit of a head start, um, compared to some of my colleagues back home and here, who were sort of discovering the technology on the fly.
Yeah.
So for me, I had like a little bit of a jump, as far as being able to transition from in-person um, lessons to virtual, to solely virtual, and also doing things like live streaming on Facebook
Yeah.
in the beginning. Uh, that's the thing that everyone was sort of doing at the beginning. If you kind of go back like 8 months, when all of the gigs started to dry up, and there was, you know, all the musicians were suffering because there was no live gigs. The easy thing to do for most musicians was to do what they do best, is play music, you know, from the comfort of their home or in their garage, and live stream that music to everyone else. It sort of made musicians have a sense of, you know, contribution, because we're making people feel a little bit a sense of calm, because they were able to see and hear Hawaiian music um, everywhere. Like in 8 months ago, if you were to go on anybody's Facebook feed, you would see 20 to 30 Hawaiian musicians, like elite Hawaiian musicians, doing live streams, and it was kind of a crazy time, and it was a special time, I think. Some of those streams have sort of dried up, because people have found other avenues to go,
Yeah.
to make revenue. But that was the easy way to transition into this world that we're at now, because all you had to do was have a camera, a microphone, whatever your instrument was, and then a Venmo or PayPal account, so people can give you tips virtually, you know.
Yeah.
So that was probably the first thing that people did.
And I mean, I think that we'll probably talk about even a little bit more later, kind of how important it is to kind of be on the cutting edge of technology or new trends or whatever. And I'm excited to kind of dive in a little bit more about what you did. But even just setting the context for like prior, right? Like, could you maybe talk, and you don't have to go into too much detail, but like how many students that you had and so forth, and kind of, you know, it sounds like you're already doing some hybrid mix prior. I would love to kind of set the context there for people, and then we can walk through like what happened and how you did that transition.
Yeah, sure. So just to give you an idea of what my typical year kind of looked like as far as a Hawaiian musician, and most Hawaiian musicians, for that matter, are ukulele teachers or ukulele artists. Um, I would I would say most musicians had sort of like their weekly gig that they would do, you know, Kanikapila Grill back in Hawaii. Some musicians would play there. Mine was Noelani's here in San Carlos.
Great
So that
restaurant,
was like,
by the way. Everyone
yeah,
check
oh
it out.
yeah. She didn't pay me to plug her here,
Oh,
but
we'll plug no
yeah, they're
them every time.
amazing.
They're phenomenal. Check them out. San Mateo or San Carlos. Sorry,
San
San Carlos.
Carlos, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sorry about
Yeah,
that.
and so that was sort of my weekly gig. I was playing there on Thursdays, and then like throughout the year, I would do a lot of traveling. I would do a lot of ukulele workshops and festivals around the country. Like I would go to, I've been to Japan on the East Coast, up in Oregon, Wisconsin, like different places, Idaho. Um, And so those would sprinkle throughout the year, maybe about like 7 or 8 of those types of festivals throughout the year. And then maybe here and there, at various locations, like a concert type of a event, you know.
Yeah.
So and then here and there, I would have I had my base of students that I would teach, and I've always been sort of picky about when it comes to teaching private lessons and students. Um, you know, they would have to show a commitment to want to learn. And you know, I just kind of treaded very carefully in that realm. And so when the pandemic happened, all of that stuff just kind of went away. Even my regular gig at Noelani's was gone. All of the festivals were gone. There was no travel. And the one thing that I saw right away that was an easy thing to transition virtually was the lessons. And I don't want to get into specific numbers, but I had a modest base of students in person
Yeah.
that, you know, I tried to control and keep the numbers down. But as soon as I went virtual, it sort of opened me up to a greater audience. You know, I have students now in Texas and Japan and just all over the place. And so I think once I was able to make that announcement and switch, um, it was a very easy, successful transition over to the virtual world. Of course, the things and before I think you had the question before if I had any virtual students before. I think I had one virtual student before. In the past, the technology it was just kind of not as stable. I think like Skype was a little sketchy
Yeah.
during this period, and then even Zoom wasn't at where it is now. You know,
Yeah.
Zoom during the past year they've invested all sorts of money and just beefed up their infrastructure. So they're a much different company now than they were 8 months ago. So um, that was the easiest thing to do was take students and then teach them remotely. The thing I was immediately concerned about was when you're like sitting right across from a student, you're able to kind of gauge um, you know, like I like to do things like see when they're fretting different chords. I like to see where they're struggling, you know, like
Yeah.
where they're struggling with the strum in particular. Um, and when you're doing a lesson remote, it's a little bit harder. It took me a while, maybe a good month or month and a half to really get used to um, see or being able to gauge what my students were doing
Yeah.
on the other end. And you're sort of at the mercy of their technology. You know, they may just have like a phone with a low resolution and not even an external mic. They may be using the mic in the phone. So that presents its own set of obstacles. So even now, I don't really have like a set of requirements for students. Like they have to have this technology to be able to learn. But um, so even now, there are little you know, hurdles that I have to kind of get by.
Yeah.
I was like, you know, I have to say like, can you repeat that? Or, um, huh? You know, I just try to do it in a light way that's where I can still kind of gauge what's happening and fix what's happening.
Did you make that shift right away? Like, was it kind of like, I mean, I remember knowing about COVID in like January, and I was so kind of, I had to go on some business trips and we're, wearing the masks and everything at that point. But, it took a little bit for it to kind of set in that like things were going to be fundamentally different for the year. And,
Mhm.
probably a year, 2 years now with where everything is at. Were you able to kind of do that right away? And maybe if you have some tips for people, is it to kind of move virtual and adapt as quickly as possible? Is it to kind of wait it out and figure out where things work? I mean, I think we're gonna have a lot of people watching this that maybe aren't even music teachers, but just generally kind of assessing that process, any kind of feedback or advice for people on like, hey, just do it right away or kind of see where things go and then, figure out, what you need to be successful, right? Like you said, not every student, you know, has the technology that they might need, or,
Yeah.
Zoom, not all the platforms work perfect even.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent questions. So I'm sure, like everyone else, when the pandemic happened, everybody was kind of in freak out mode, right? Like we weren't sure how long this was gonna last. If it was gonna be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 6 months. Um, so there was that uncertainty uh, in the initial days, and then um, because of that too, and everything that was happening with loss of other sorts of revenue, there was the initial thing that was happening was that there was a lot of like depression, and people weren't really being motivated to do things like think about how to transition into a virtual realm, right? So I think, like, for me, I had to get over the initial shock of it, and then I'm always one of those you know uh I'm a huge optimist, so I like to I think you pointed this out too, about my positivity. So I like to think of things in a positive way, and I like to find solutions, and also with my IT background, as far as that helps as well, because you have to find solutions quickly, right? So um, I didn't let the uncertainty sort of deter me. I wanted, I mean, I figured it would be like a long term kind of thing. So, and I figured um, I had always wanted to shift to virtual, but I was never really motivated to do so. And the pandemic was sort of like a kick in the butt to really um, change gears and shift my entire thing to virtual. Um, so and because of my experience in technology, I was able to do that fairly quickly. And I mean, even for me, with experience in technology and Zoom, a lot of it, I mean, it wasn't like the next day I was, um, you know, I had everything that I have now, and I was up and running. It took a lot of trial and error. Like in the beginning, I had just like a simple laptop. Um, I had a mic that I just happened to have around the house, just by from being a musician. I just had a mic. I had zero lighting. I have a professional light that I use now, but I had like a lamp, I think, um, an extra lamp that I had to convince my wife to let me use. And so I grabbed the lamp and stuck that, in back of where the laptop camera was. I did have a nice camera. I had a nice Brio web camera. So that was huge. And so I kind of worked with that in the beginning, and I did everything that way. My Zoom classes were that way. My Facebook lives were that way. And then as time went on, I sort of tweaked things to, I always wanted to find a better solution as things went on. So then I grabbed a better light, did a lot of research, grabbed the best light that I could afford, and then I did a lot of research with microphones too. I don't have like the most glamorous or expensive mic, but I have the most practical mic. I did a lot of research on that too. So a lot of it was trial and error to get to the point where I am now. So what I'm using now is, I used to have an external webcam, laptop, and a mic and a lamp. And now I'm currently using an iPad Pro with the camera, and then I use a this microphone made by a company called Blue. I don't know if you can see that. It's a USB. And where is it? There you go.
Yeah.
So it's a condenser mic, so it's really good at, like a lot of the podcasts that you see, like Joe Rogan and a lot of the popular YouTubers and podcasters. They use high powered condenser mics like this one, by companies like Shure, Rode, Blue.
Yeah.
So I have kind of like a mid-tier one. It's great because the thing that's great about this one is what I tried to do is as I continued and progressed in the virtual realm, I tried to tweak my setup to be more minimalist, but not sacrifice the technology because it's being minimal, right? So I have the iPad Pro and this little blue microphone, which is powered by USB-C, and it's going straight into my iPad Pro. So it's a very simple yet highly effective setup. And then the light's probably like the most high maka thing of this whole thing. You know, it's like this huge light that's right in back of my iPad Pro. So it's like this glaring light. So if you come in, if you see, you know, if you come into the room, you can see, it looks like a set, you know, like a
movie
like
set.
a right, like a newsroom or something like that, or a movie or something. But I mean, those are the things I learned along the way that are very important. Is you have to treat it like it's a sort of like a little mini production, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, it basically is. You have to be able to be heard, and that's where a nice mic comes into play, and seen. And these iPad Pros have really nice high resolution cameras, and then you want to be able to control lighting in any environment. So even if it's overcast outside and all the shades are up, you want to be able to still have enough light to be able to present. And I took all of these concepts and I use them not only for my Zoom lessons, but I use them also for my YouTube channel, which also ramped up during that pandemic time. I was doing YouTube before the pandemic, but because of the pandemic, I thought it was a way. So I'll kind of back up a little bit. My YouTube channel, I created it because I wanted an outlet to share Hawaiian music. There are like a billion ukulele sites. If you type in ukulele in the search results in YouTube, you know, millions will come up, right? And in the beginning, I was kind of sort of fighting my place in YouTube. And I think at one of the festivals I was playing at, somebody came up to me and brought me. I'm sure all of you have you all seen the Hemele Aloha book? It's a blue book of Hawaiian songs.
Yeah, I think we have it somewhere back in the house.
Yes, it's a very popular book. You can get it at, you know, Costco back in Hawaii, Borders, all. Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Hey, Zach. Hey, Zach was at my last workshop that I just finished right before I joined this panel. So the Hemele Aloha book. In the beginning, my YouTube channel was just all over the place. I was doing gear. Of course, I was doing tech and gear because that's sort of my forte and background. And then as soon as the person at that ukulele festival walked up to me with that book and they said, you know, I don't know how any of these songs go. And like right at that moment, like angels started to sing and I had an epiphany. And I said, man, I know a lot of these songs. So why don't I dedicate a channel where every week I'll teach a new Hawaiian song out of this book. And then right away I found my niche in the YouTube space. I heard some very good advice at one time. Somebody said was, you don't want to try to make a YouTube channel and try to find an audience. You want to find your niche in YouTube and have the audience find you.
Yeah.
Because there's only one you, right? So you specialize in the thing that you do and guarantee your audience will find its way to you.
For sure. And
I don't even know what the original question was.
No, I'll kind of recap and summarize. I think there was so many gems within there. I think the first thing, and this is something, I mean, you and I have talked about offline, and one of the reasons why I just really respect you and I'm thankful to have you on the board, but have you as a friend, is that you have kind of this optimism, right? No matter what happens, you know, we'll figure out a way to kind of come through it. And I think that's actually something that is quintessential, so to speak, and a kind of a prerequisite of any adaptation and so forth. Is like, hey, no matter what, we're gonna figure out a way to make it through, right? There is always a way. We're, you know, thankful and, you know, blessed to be alive and, you know, and everything like that. And that's a good, you know, that's a good first start. And then I think a couple of the other things that you'd mentioned, and again, kind of going back to that main theme of always like being curious and on the front end of like, or on the leading edge of what's happening, what type of technology do I need to use? You know, you don't need to go out and spend, you know, $10,000 to, you know, make your own Joe Rogan studio. You can find a lot of good stuff in between that's already out there to use to help kind of bolster what you do. And then I think the third thing from that, and something that I think is so phenomenal about the internet is you can kind of find your niche, right? Or niche or
Yeah.
niche or how you know, pronounce the word.
Depends how
But
fancy you want to sound.
yeah, yeah, it depends on.
I
I'm not very
always,
fancy person.
I always say niche because it makes me sound French.
Oh yeah, very. But these type of things are like really important, and I'm not going to go down on a tangent here, but one of the reasons why I'm so optimistic about Hawaii, for example, and the culture and the aloha spirit that we have here, I'm back home filming this right now in the lovely New Valley, is that, you know, technology enables us to export in a positive sense a lot of the cultural practices and so forth to the broader world, right? So instead of kind of the other way that I think has historically been the trend of kind of pushing down, you know, cultures and kind of a negative standpoint onto people, you can actually share the beauty of whether it be the music or the culture or whatever it may be onto a broader audience, and then find the people, as you mentioned prior, that are interested in that kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
Are interested in Hawaiian music, and just doing something simple like, you know, opening up the book and going through one per week, and you can actually build not just a massive following, but a sustainable business maybe, or even if it's you know, not for, you know, even the HCCNC, we don't have like, we're in a big chamber of commerce. We aren't all high mucka mucka like a lot of the other ones, which we love all you folks as well too. But we have a really, you know, good kind of following and group of people that come together for these type of things. And you know, if it wasn't possible for kind of, you know, the internet and email and Facebook and some of this other stuff, you know, we wouldn't be here. So I think that's a really, you know, it's so cool to hear kind of the story of how you capitalized and kind of looked and said, hey, you know, here's an you know, bad time, but great opportunity for me to expand and do something new. So thank you.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have one or two more kind of tactical questions, and then maybe
Hmm.
we can open it, you know, up. We have a few questions coming in for the audience and a few other things. One was going to be like, you know, I think a lot of the people that are going virtual now are, um, they are, you know, it's not just like the mic and the computer. They're figuring out like, how do I communicate? How do I schedule? Right? It's not like, what do you use certain things for, like the scheduling, or I know you use Zoom and you have the iPad, which is so cool that they have the camera on and everything. It's like a film. What about like scheduling and like having people pay you and these type of like, you know, you know, things like, what would you recommend if someone, whether it be music business or other kind of small businesses, to kind of get set up at the minimum basic that they need to operate?
I mean, you don't really need anything fancy. I mean, the the thing about musicians is that it kind of forces you. I'm sure like other art forms as well, photographers, DJs, and you know, it kind of forces you to be a master of all trades, right? You have to be your own accountant, your own marketing person, your own secretary to schedule things, graphic artist. You learn how to do all these things, even if you don't necessarily want to do them. You kind of have to do them to excel at your the thing that you're passionate about. So I was always kind of dabbling in those kind of areas, and then I outsource the things that I'm not good at, like accounting and numbers and things like that. But you know, to get started, I mean, it could be something as easy as an Excel spreadsheet. Like in the beginning, when I had a manageable student base, I could really track all of everything on my phone. And then as it started to grow, I had to actually import everything into an Excel spreadsheet, which I continue to use. I don't use anything fancy like some database manager or anything like that. I track student progress on just a basic Excel spreadsheet. And then as far as like invoicing and things like that, I use pretty much what a lot of musicians are using, which is Venmo and PayPal. I'm able to invoice that way. And I track everything in Google Calendar, which is, it's a great source for just scheduling and keeping track of things. With our HCCNC, if I didn't have those invites from you, I probably wouldn't show up to more meetings. But because you send those reminders, I'm able to join those board meetings. Yeah, you don't really need anything fancy. Like some of the more fancy programs that I've used in recent months are programs like Good Notes, which is really cool, especially if you're using an iPad Pro, because you could, it's like having a pad of paper, a digital pad of paper where I can quickly jot down. Like for this talk, I had bullet points that I used your master bullet points, and I sort of wrote notes on a digital notes that I'm able to reference right here. Good Notes is one. Dropbox is great because I can upload everything into a virtual space and use it as a place to store everything in the cloud. Like when you needed a picture of me, I just quickly got something from Dropbox and emailed it to you. Those kind of things is through trial and error. I use a great font software or graphic software called Typography, it's a great one because I make all of my flyers, including the one for the workshop that I did before this talk, all in typography, and I just uploaded it into Instagram and Facebook. So it's a lot of it is sort of this finding what works for you. A lot of these these apps won't work for everybody, but I've sort of kind of found the two or three apps that sort of really work well for me, and it makes things a lot easier than it would be without the apps.
No, that's phenomenal. And so I have kind of like two more questions, and then maybe we can open it up to some from the audience. The first is going to be, I think one of the things that was so cool for me to hear was that, hey, you've been able to kind of expand even. And there are some benefits, right, to virtual, right? You cut down maybe on travel time for the students and so forth. So can you maybe talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of, maybe the pro, you get record the lessons, the cons being, like you mentioned, you can't check their shot and everything at the beginning. And then, maybe even an extension of that, like, is this something that you plan to keep? So what are some of the pros and cons, and like, do you plan to continue on kind of how you are, or are you going to change that up, as things kind of maybe return back to normal come end of 2021, end of 2022?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, since I had always wanted to go virtual, the pandemic sort of kind of had, made me shift gears a little bit and kind of, really make it happen. I think the biggest pro is that my reach is farther now. I can teach virtually anywhere. I can teach people back in Hawaii, Japan. Japan's hard because I have to teach later at night and it's like morning over there. But I always make it work. So I think that's the biggest pro, is a bigger reach. The con is like we mentioned before, I don't have that immediate contact with the students, so I can't. I love that, I love being able to see what people are doing wrong and like fixing that, and hearing that immediacy of them, making that change. I'm getting really good at. Sorry, it's my dog. I'm getting really good at noticing things and making observations and corrections over Zoom, but it took me a while to get to that place. At first, it was really hard for me, and I struggled to hear. The biggest problem with Zoom is, and it's still a problem today, is the latency. It's not like
Yeah.
you can have, like, we can't have 9 people all with their ukuleles and all playing at the same time and singing, and it come out a cohesive, listenable thing. you
Yeah. True.
that's the biggest problem. So I had to. That's one of the big shifts that I had to make in the way that I teach. It's more of a I show you how to do something, and then I pause, and then you try to play it back, and then I observe and listen, and then we sort of there's that interplay that way. A little less immediacy and a little more kind of like pause and observe and back and forth. So it took a while to get used to that. I still wish there was one of the ways that I love teaching is the way I learned after I initially learned, by myself, was is there's no replacing that the playing along with someone and sort of at the same time, and that interplay. I think you excel so much quicker when you can play with other musicians. So that's sort of we sacrifice that by virtual learning, but there's definitely ways around that, and I think I've tweaked my the way that I teach in a way that's beneficial for the students.
That's phenomenal. So I was going to ask one other question, but I'll actually do that at the end as we wrap up and make sure that people can find you and everything. We had a few questions from the crowd. We have a kind of an intimate group of kind of people that we know at HCCNC and so forth. So if you're able to talk, I'll kind of call you out and maybe you can ask the question yourself. Susan, you had a question on organizing virtual classes. Would you mind asking it? And if not, just let me know and I can do it over for you.
So thank you, Stephen, for speaking to us today. That was a very interesting presentation, and I was most surprised when you said you used to be shy. I
Hey,
cannot.
I used to be shy,
I
and I'm a
cannot.
Leo, which don't go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Actually, I got rid of all that shyness.
Good. So I was wondering about your virtual classes, and you're probably reaching more people outside of the Bay Area.
Mhm.
So, like, what percentage would you say is that now? Because I know you said that you had one person from Texas prior to COVID. So what is your percentage now?
I would say like a third of my student base
Wow,
is
very
not
good,
not local. Yeah,
very good.
yeah. In the past, um, I'd have people coming. My student base would be a lot of people from San Francisco would come into the peninsula, but most of the students would be local to this area. Um, and so now, yeah, it's I still have Bay Area students, but yeah, definitely a wider reach now.
That's phenomenal, man. Congrats. It's really cool. I think this is actually a bright kind of shining star, not only for you in the Bay Area, but for people in Hawaii, like we were mentioning before, like kind of have that reach right now that wasn't maybe there before, whether it be for smaller goods and so forth. And I think there's so much opportunity, right? We just kind of have to
Oh,
take it.
definitely, yeah.
That's
And it goes both ways too. You know, if you've always wanted to learn ukulele, there's so much more available resources now as well. Because I'm not the only one out there teaching personal, private lessons. All of my, a lot of my friends in Hawaii are doing similar things. So a lot of their virtual lessons have greatly improved as well. Um,
But if
and
they're
it's not as
looking anywhere, they need to go to you first.
yeah, start with me. It's funny too because you know uh, music is is kind of inherently like a very, it's a weird thing because it can be competitive. You know, you can as far as like you know, reaching for the same demographic and those kind of things. But the ukulele community, in my experience, even like outside of COVID and all this, it's always been a very sharing community. Like I to this day, I get a ton of referrals from my peers and colleagues who are also ukulele teachers. I get references from them, you know, all the time. So really grateful for that. And you know, I'll also, if I'm not able to accommodate, I'll refer out to other folks as well. If I, you know, if I think a student has reached a certain point where they're unable to learn a certain type of thing, and I think they would benefit more from another teacher, then I would without hesitation shift them in that direction. It's
That's
not
awesome.
always about the bottom line.
No, 100%. And this is one of the things that we love about you is, you know, at the end of the day, it's making the people successful and good at what they do and spreading the aloha there. We have a few more. Do you mind if we run like 4 to 5 minutes late? We have
Yeah,
a few more questions.
I don't know. The only thing that's waiting for me is my Japanese whiskey.
Oh, so we have one.
Well, so yeah, we might have to cut it short.
So we have one from Linda and Daryl. Go ahead, Linda.
Go ahead. Just stop.
Okay, so Stephen, I was wondering how your audience or your students outside of San Francisco found you. Were they referrals, or did they see you on YouTube, or were they here visiting and saw you at Noelani's, or what was the connection to reaching outside of the Bay Area?
That's an excellent question. That's an excellent question, Linda. Yeah. And the answer is all of what you just said. I have students currently that saw me at Noelani's, and they just found out that I teach. And so, you know, some of them were beginners, some of them were a little bit more seasoned. I do have a few students who saw my YouTube channel and learned some of the lesson plans on there, and then wanted to kind of, you know, dive a little deeper. Yeah, I always try to steer people to YouTube because you can learn a lot from my YouTube channel. But if you want to kind of refine it, you know, it's the same like with you know, Michael, you know, like with martial arts, right? There's only so much that you can learn from that YouTube source, and if you want it like that one-on-one kind of a training, it's better to find a sensei or a kumu or a teacher that can help guide you. But yeah, so all of that, referrals, people have seen me live, and my YouTube channel, probably the top 3 sources of where I get my students. It's funny, I don't do a ton of marketing as far as private lessons are concerned. I do marketing for like everything else as far as like my live performances and things like that. But for private students, I don't really do any marketing. A lot of word of mouth.
So is your marketing for your live performance like on Instagram or on Facebook or?
Yeah, Instagram. I really utilize. I love utilizing social media. Some people think like social media is kind of played out, but I think there's so much, it can offer so much because people are still on there. You know, people are still scrolling Facebook news feeds and finding out about things through Facebook. So I like to, for the most part, I'll just post it on various groups, like ukulele focus groups that I'm a member of. And then I'll post it in places like Instagram, just on, you know, the friends that I have on Instagram, and then also Facebook. I also use Tumblr and Twitter. Occasionally I'll pay for an ad because I actually have a musician Facebook page where I can pay for advertisements, but very rarely, only if it's like a major event, will I have to pay for an ad. Usually I'm able to do it just by regular posts. I haven't dived into TikTok or Snapchat yet. it's a little out of my reach. I think you have to be able to dance.
Okay, that's good, thanks.
We have two more questions on here. The first one is kind of question comment, but Rainbow, you had mentioned the Acuity and some of these online scheduling. I know you run, your solo practice as well, helping people kind of with their careers and life and so forth. So if you want to add anything to there, Rainbow, go ahead.
Oh yeah, you did.
Oh no, I'm good. I feel like it was interesting and lovely to hear more about how you made that shift. And I'm in the same boat of having done Zoom for quite some time. And so, but it's another thing to add in all the extras of teaching with the breakout rooms, etc. So, so I appreciate, I too probably need to buy one of those special mics at some point, but I make do with what I got, and I'm like,
No, your light looks great. Are you using like
Well,
natural light right now?
natural light. I'm still in Hawaii. So
Yeah.
I actually moved here in March. So yes, I went backwards.
I'm envious of all my friends in Hawaii because they always have the best lighting, like the sunset,
Yeah.
the magic hour lighting, and I'm all like having to struggle with this
Yes.
light.
But I've done really well with just using like speaking of like lighting, like just that.
Totally, yeah. No,
that actually works.
I tell people
pretty
you
well.
don't have to spend a lot of money on lighting. For a long time, I used that lamp that I mentioned earlier, and people would not know any different because they can't see what's behind the camera, right? So use whatever is at your disposal. Yeah, don't feel like you have to break the bank to have a lot of the technology that you need.
Yeah, but I do think it's interesting because I'm in the Oakland Interfaith Gospel Choir, and we've been really struggling with how to be able to sing together, right? I mean, right now it's I love that you said that you don't require your students to have a certain capacity or a certain kind of technology, because there are some really great platforms out there, but they're not accessible to everyone. And so we continue with Zoom and we don't get to sing together, but we can still do those virtual choir projects, which have been super fun to be able to do.
Yeah.
But it is
there are some I'm sure you guys have
ones.
seen like a lot of these you see a lot of these events on TV, like they'll have the People's Choice Awards, or like now everything's virtual, right? And you see like a bunch of boxes and somehow people are singing together. A lot of that stuff is done pre-recorded, and so it's kind of, it gives the illusion that it's being done live, but it's all pre-recorded, and then everybody's like, wow, that's amazing. But there are some really cool software platforms available that essentially what they do is it's sort of like Zoom, but say it was me, you, Michael, and Daryl. We had a band, right? And it was the 4 squares like that, right? What it would do is it would buffer the signal, and it basically delay the signal so that all 4 of us could sing together and then replay it back, so that we're singing in tandem. So there are some cool platforms like that. I don't recall the names of any of them, but maybe I could find out, let Michael know. He can send it out.
Yeah, I know the gospel choir has really looked into it big time, because there's, I don't know, 300 some people between the 3 different choirs. And so it's definitely a technology. They were just saying on our last rehearsal that it's not everyone has like super high bandwidth to be able to do it all.
That's important too.
That's why they've just stuck with like, let's keep it accessible, and we'll just do the individual, recording, so then we can do that virtual choir project like you're talking about. So yeah.
Don't make it fancy, just press.
Yeah.
Just go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Rainbow.
thanks.
Yeah, and so we have one more before we wrap it up. Kyle, you had a question on kind of branding virtually and so forth.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for the panel. So, when you go on YouTube, I thought what you said about finding your market and then I guess creating or being yourself, and then your market will find you. Maybe could you explain a little bit more or expand on that? In my instance, I'm you know, I'm in the senior care business and want to find a certain niche, but then, you know, I see what people providing really quality content, but their views are really low. On the other hand, I see people just creating viral content and it's maybe not
Mm.
as great content, but it's entertaining. And so I'm kind of in between, like figuring out what's the best approach.
Yeah, for sure. I think what worked for me was that I kind of assessed what was out there as far as ukulele content, and sort of took it all in and decided not to be like any of that. I the inspiration that I get, because I do all of my own editing right on the same iPad that I was talking about. So I create, edit, upload, market. I do everything on my iPad Pro, so it's really convenient. The inspiration that I get from creating my videos come more from outside the ukulele realm. So I get a lot of inspiration from like sneakerhead videos and like tech videos. You know, anything that's not music really. So by the time I'm able to kind of like process and rehash sort of my take on those videos, but in a ukulele realm, it's a fresh approach. You know what I'm saying? It's something new that people haven't seen in the ukulele space because I got it from like a sneaker video. So I guess the best way to and I've always, like in the beginning, I sort of tried to emulate and be a little bit over the top and a little bit more extra in my presentation. But then I sort of learned how to dial it back and speak to the camera like it was just I was speaking to anybody else who I'd meet face to face. So I think that's like the most important thing because people can pick up on that when they watch your videos. They can tell if you're if you're not being genuine, and they can tell if you're being yourself. You know. So I think whenever you make those videos, get inspired. Like don't necessarily look at the videos that are in your vocation. You know, like look at like find the videos on YouTube that you like to watch and kind of base it, or just even if you don't emulate that, you can kind of base or just grab inspiration from that so that you can make your own content. But always be yourself. I don't know if that was helpful.
No, that's definitely helpful.
I would echo, that you never want to, sell out who you are as an individual for, a short-term bump in the marketing cycle and so forth. So this is phenomenal. As you can tell, we've already been through an hour. The sun is going down in Hawaii. And
yeah, you need one of these lamp. You need a lamp, Michael.
I need to get the lamp. I was in the other room and I'm looking east right now. So the sun went down and we don't get any of the sun from the west.
I would just add one thing to that last Kyle's last question.
Yeah, sure.
One thing that I sort of kind of stick with on all of my videos. So I kind of have the same format that I stick to all the time. I always open up my videos by saying, aloha mai kako ukulele friends. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I explain what the channel is about. And then I kind of sort of get into the nitty gritty and then I wrap it up at the end, sort of like anything else that you would do. And I always keep it within a 10-minute format. So it's like a really accessible, quick thing that people can watch. But 10 minutes is like that magic number because 10 minutes on YouTube is the time where anything longer than 10 minutes, you can take advantage of the AdSense before you can take advantage of, I'm speaking on like monetary terms now, they can place ads in the beginning, middle, and the end of the video. So you want to kind of keep your videos, if you can, to over 10 minutes, but like under 15 minutes. If anything over 15 minutes is 15 minutes is a little too long. And for me, like my trademark is I always start off my videos with a blooper, like a little quick blooper. Like I'll show myself like messing up just to show like the human side. I don't want to show that everything's perfect and I edit everything in a certain way. So most of my videos will have like a blooper in the beginning and then I'll get to the content.
That's awesome. But and yeah, I mean, I think like there is interesting because all of the major podcasts or videos or whatever it may be, all of the kind of cutting edge content, you always have that hook that you remember people by, right? And I think it's so cool to have you know, that kind of unique thing that you do, which people will always kind of keep in mind and remember. So
Yeah.
before we wrap up and kind of turn off, and if people want to stay on and talk a little bit, that's all good with me. I'll turn my light on in a second. I'm so sorry about that. How do people find you? And what are your plans for 2021? What are you most excited about?
Well, if they can find me any of my social media platforms, I just go under Steven Espaniola. I don't have like a cool nickname or anything. So just search me, Steven Espaniola, on any of social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. What else? Or you can go to my website. My website is www.stevenespaniola.com. And that's it. If you want to get in touch with me, my email is actually listed on, I think, my Instagram, Facebook, and at my website. So you can just shoot me an email through there, and I'm pretty most times responsive.
Yeah. Phenomenal. Well, thank you so much for joining. This is phenomenal. I mean, I learned a ton already. I know everyone is thankful and grateful to have you. Really looking forward to turning this into video content that people are watching right now, or audio content. We'll put in all the links and everything to the website, the Instagram, the Facebook, the Twitter, and so forth underneath. And then 2021, what is your one goal for what you're doing and so forth? What are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think I purposely did not answer that question.
Knock on wood.
You know, the optimist in me is hoping that we get the pandemic under control, the vaccine, and that I don't think we're going to get into any normal place this year. So I think it's going to be sort of like a hybrid. I think people are still going to be in a virtual space throughout 2021. So I'm just kind of, looking in that direction and seeing how I can maintain that. I am getting strange requests to play weddings, which is crazy because I don't know how they're gonna do their weddings in this climate. So I may kind of feel that out and see what they plan to do with some of these wedding gigs. But definitely want to stay safe and smart, and hope everyone does the same.
Right on. Perfect. Well, mahalo nui loa. Aloha to everyone that's listening. On behalf of the HCCNC, thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen. And I am now going to cut the recording button off. Bye-bye. Stephen.